You can never tell much from OTAs, but you can look at a quarterback's mechanics pretty closely, and you can tell that McCarthy's have actually improved. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. My hashtag everydayers. I appreciate you all so very much. Today on the show, we're brain dead. Oh, baby, we're doing the nastiest thing. We're going to evaluate OTA film. And by film, I mean clips that have gone up on YouTube Shorts and random Twitter clips from beat reporters that were taken from satellite imagery. That's what we're going with. Okay, hear me out. Okay? Don't get mad yet that I'm doing this. So here's the deal. I did this last year, and it turned out to actually be a really informative exercise. We just have to be really careful about what questions we expect to be answerable in OTAs and what we can't be, and what isn't answerable in OTAs. So there is a little bit of discourse this year because there's somebody who's been posting like daily statistics of OTAs for the Browns quarterback room. And that's insane. That's just pure engagement bait. You will never, ever, ever get anything from that. And in fact, you that might even have an inverse correlation to what is good, because in this particular time, you're trying suboptimal things. You're maybe not even making the decision of like who to throw to based on who's open in the coverage, but rather you're limit testing certain things, or you're trying to see, hey, in cover 3, is that corner actually there? Maybe if he backs off a certain way, what happens if they blitz? There's a little bit of an experimentation to it, a limit testing to it, and also just a learning curve to it. This is a time where it's like probably the best time of the year to make mistakes. So statistically, like, that is a very silly exercise, okay? And it's very distinct from what I am doing. What you're going to get out of today is not going to give you a comprehensive view of how good JJ McCarthy is as a quarterback. What I do think I can give you is a pretty complete view of how good JJ McCarthy is as a mechanical thrower. We can do like the jugs machine thing and talk about a bunch of little mechanical details that are going to either create consistency or inconsistency moving forward. This is one of those times, and I'll give you my spiel about I don't care where the ball goes when it comes to this, which is, if you're unfamiliar with this kind of analysis, that might sound really crazy, right? What do you mean you don't care where the ball goes? It's a throw. What do you mean you don't care if the throw is accurate or not? Because I'm looking at the process. I'm looking at the mechanics. So there's a few things I'm going to talk about in this one, okay? I'll give you all of them. I'm going to talk about hip dissociation. I'm going to talk about hip rotation and over rotation. I'm going to talk about arm angle on the follow through, as evidenced by the follow through, but arm angle as the ball comes through. I'm going to talk about how wide your feet should be. I'm going to talk about pocket movements and hitches, and then I'm going to talk about throwing on the move left, which I actually mentioned on the show earlier this week, but I'm going to repeat that point as well for everybody who missed it. Okay, this is the level of detail that we're going to do here. This is what I think you can get out of OTAs. I am not going to care if he actually delivered the ball on air accurately to Jalen Naylor or not. It's just not there's no pressure. There's no the timings might not even be precise. You might even be going 75% speed. It just will not translate for better or worse. So when we get the clips we get, which are mostly going to be accurate throws, the Vikings aren't going to put out a whole bunch of misses. It doesn't really matter to me that those throws are very, very, very accurate, because there's a selection bias to it, and it doesn't matter anyways. Are you with me still? If you are with me still, then that means you probably have bought into this a little bit. So let's talk about hip and shoulder dissociation. I have talked about this a ton on the show, so I'll be very brief about it. But basically, your body is creating torque when you are throwing a football, when you're doing a golf swing, when you're swinging a baseball bat, when you're doing basically anything that involves trying to make something go really fast, that is going to revolve around torque. It is the best way to create a really, really, really fast motion with the human body, is to twist it up and then let it untwist like you're smacking someone with a towel. The best way to get that torque is to unleash your hips and then unleash your shoulders. Again, I use golf as an example. I think a golf swing and a QB throw biomechanically are really, really, really similar. And so I know a lot of my listeners play golf and are familiar with that. But if you watch like a good golf swing, watch like a Phil Mickelson, right? Pre-injury young Tiger Woods. You will see hips come through and then you'll see shoulders come through after. Basically, you are uncorking all the torque in your legs and then keeping your shoulders still, which transfers all that motion, all that potential energy into your shoulders. And then your shoulders come through with every ounce of energy you had in your body at once. That energy gets transferred to the ball. When you throw it, then that puts as much power as possible into the throw as you could possibly want. There's a bit of a difference with a baseball pitch where you're focused so much on speed and where it's a different shape of a ball. So things are a little bit different there. But with a football, that's roughly, you want every single ounce of your energy possible to be transferred into your shoulders so that you can get as much velocity on the ball as possible. That is why you want hips to go first and then shoulders to go later. So there's this interesting thing with JJ McCarthy where in college he had a lot of this hip dissociation, and it's hip and shoulder dissociation. And I think it's something that made NFL teams really excited. This is the kind of thing that a Kevin O'Connell would be really, really tuned into. He would know this kind of thing. Where you would see him in college, his hips would go, his shoulders would go, and he would zip it, he would bullet pass it. There was a whole thing about arm strength, which is what I was talking about in the show last time. And I still challenge anybody who thinks that JJ McCarthy has a weak arm to explain themselves, because you probably are just talking about, poor deep accuracy or whatever. You're not actually talking about arm strength. Arm strength, that zip, that bullet, is what he had in spades in college. And if you don't believe me, you didn't watch Sit Down. He, again, has it. Like, the ball just rifles in there. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's like, whoa, this quarterback's got a bunch of zip. Everybody talks about that. That comes from that hip and shoulder dissociation. But last year, he was changing a whole bunch of stuff about his mechanics. We'll get to why later. But he wasn't doing that as much. His hips and his shoulders were coming through at the same time, which would happen if you're being a little more careful. If you're kind of holding back, you're pulling your punch a little bit. You're trying not to put as much zip on the ball all the time, and you're instead thinking a little bit more about, what am I tucking my elbow? What am I doing? If you've been given a bunch of mechanical tips, everything's going to be a little more robotic, less fluid, and you're not going to have the hips and then the shoulders go. It's just kind of all going to go at once because you're thinking about so many other things that it's no longer the natural motion. It is, I think, an unavoidable stage in improving your mechanics of anything for those like fluid, natural nuances to sort of stiffen up while you're thinking about all this other stuff. Again, anybody who has taken a golf lesson, you probably know some version of what I'm talking about here. It's just the thing that happens when you're messing with someone's mechanics, right? So you hope that that's just a temporary thing, that the dissociation would come back. This is the first thing I can give you from OTAs. 8 minutes into the show, 9 minutes into the show. This is the first thing I can give you, which is yes, it looks like it is back. If you don't believe me because I don't look athletic enough for you, which a lot of you seem to think matters, don't take my word for it. Go watch my Patreon video, patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. I got all the video there. If you want to go do it, drop me $4. I'll show you all of the video that you want, and then you can cancel it right away after that. Okay, I don't even care. Or you can just wait for a month. It'll be free soon. So it probably like close to like training camp, I'll make it free. So you can just wait and I'll prove myself there, but I'll show my work. Okay. I'm not making it up. That dissociation is there. His hips are moving and then his shoulders are moving. And what's beautiful about OTAs is the Vikings do grace us every once in a while with a nice slow-mo, like 120 frame video, full body of him throwing. So you can see in beautiful detail all of his mechanics. And you can see that the hips move before the shoulders move, and that's really great. That brings us to the rotation point. I'm not going to beleaguer this one because I've talked about his over-rotation incessantly on this podcast, and I want to move to other things. But roughly, that same like torque idea, if his hips continue to come forward like they did really, really hard in college, that means that that energy isn't transferring up to the shoulders that you weigh the way that you want to. And that means that, he's not getting everything out of his body, right? So what you want to see is hips to be square to the target on the follow through. You basically want, if you watch like a Tom Brady throw, right? His hips will be square to the target, and in his follow through, his hand will basically be picking his left pocket. His right hand will be picking his left pocket. That's about where his hand will end up. That is like your picture perfect follow through. If you just watch a Tom Brady throw, that's what it's supposed to look like, right? McCarthy in college would over-rotate a lot. His hips would come forward. He would look like a baseball pitcher, which doesn't work for baseball, and that's why it's so funny that when he went out, he threw the first pitch at a Twins game, and it was a bad pitch because he wasn't throwing like a baseball pitcher anymore. I was like, oh, they're fixing it. And lo and behold, they've fixed it quite a bit. The over-rotation thing is, I would say 90% gone. It's still there a little bit, enough to maybe cause some inconsistency. I don't think it's 100% of a solved problem, but it's certainly solved enough where I don't think it's going to, if JJ McCarthy fails, this will not be why. It'll maybe cause a miss here and there, but it's probably not. If that's still his primary problem, we are in great shape. I still have a whole bunch of mechanical things I want to geek out with you about. So if you want to get in real deep to QB throwing mechanics, you are in the right place. Stick around. I'll be right back. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Monarch Money. If you've ever looked at your bank account and then been suddenly thrown into a spiraling panic, Monarch Money might be for you. Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, delivery apps, that's a good one. It's super easy to lose track of your money. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your own personal CFO, gives you full visibility and control over your finances. But it's more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, and you can stop managing your money and start actually building wealth. A lot of us have like a whole bunch of finance apps on our phone for our bank accounts, for maybe budgeting and spending, one for investments and all of that. Monarch Money molds all of that into one. So if you want to think about where your money is going and what you're doing with it, you just go to Monarch Money, and it has easy collaboration between people. So if you have a joint account or joint investments, you can manage that, set goals, and plan, and everybody can stay on the same page right from the convenience of their own device. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. Moving right along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. So let's move on to some other QB mechanics, super like detailed stuff that we're getting into with JJ McCarthy that we can see from just the little morsels of OTA stuff that we've gotten. Here's a really interesting one. His arm angle has gone outside a little bit. If you know QB really well, you know what that can possibly mean. But this is a new one that I don't think I remember from last year. Maybe I just didn't notice it, or maybe it's a new thing. But either way, this is how things are going right now. I'm going to use my little football prop. That's my little junior size football that I have on the set. You're missing out on YouTube if you're not watching on YouTube. So as you throw a ball, you want it to come in. You basically want your elbow and the ball to make a straight up and down line. You want it to come through super, super, super straight. And if you think about it, think about like a trebuchet, right? A trebuchet throws up and straight. And if that trebuchet were on like a hill and the ball were coming up and around, then you would have a really difficult time getting that to aim properly, right? Because if it releases at the wrong point in that up and around, it could either go, to the outside, to the inside. It could be pointed the wrong way if the ball is not, staying on that nice up and down trajectory. If it's not staying straight, the more it goes off its path, the harder it's going to be to time when you release it so it actually goes where you intend for it to go. For a much more extreme version of this problem than what JJ McCarthy has right now, check out Michael Penix's college tape. This was my main problem, to be honest, with Michael Penix, and I think it's why so many of his accuracy issues cropped up at Washington, and that's kind of what caused him to fall into a much more controversial tier and not be part of, the same conversations as Drake May and Jaden Daniels and all those guys. Caleb, of course. Which is that his arm would be super outward. It would be like an obtuse angle, if you really want to get mathematical about it. Obtuse elbow angle, which is not what you want. You want a nice like right angle with the elbow when it comes through. If it leaks way out here, that means it's going to be kind of coming back across your face when you throw it, and it's really, really easy to pull that to your non-dominant side or to release it too early and to spray it to your dominant side. That is a really big issue, or was a really big issue for Penix. I have absolutely no idea how that's going in Atlanta. I'm sure they're trying to fix it. Couldn't tell you how that's going. Ask Aaron Freeman. He does Locked On Falcons. But for McCarthy, his is starting to leak a little bit to the outside. This is a habit I don't love. And if you don't always get a great angle at this, especially when we're just working off of like OTA, slow-mo clips. But what you can do is you like look up the Vikings YouTube shorts. They've got a whole bunch of, JJ McCarthy completes pass to TJ Hawkinson, and it's in slow-mo and you can see it. Watch where his follow through is. Remember what I said about Tom Brady, where you want it to basically look like you're picking your own pocket. You want your right hand in your left pocket, or if you're a lefty, your left hand in your right pocket, but we're all righties for the purposes of this. So because JJ McCarthy's a righty, so it's right hand in his left pocket is what you want, but his hand is really more, it's like almost over his heart, like he's given the Pledge of Allegiance. That's a little bit high, and that's because his arm is coming in a little bit too sideways, so it's not kind of slashing down across him like you're putting on a seatbelt, not slashing down across him the way that you want it to. I do think that this will cause some inconsistency. It's not going to turn every pass he does this into a miss. So we can get passes that look perfectly accurate that have this issue, and you're going to go, well, what's the problem? He made the pass. But that particular habit is going to pull some. It's just gonna, if it doesn't get fixed. That's just age-old QB wisdom that you can talk to any guru or any quarterback over the last 20 years, and they'll say that you want things to kind of come up and down, really nice and straight. You want the ball. They'll argue over like how high you want the ball. I don't really care about that detail, but you want your arm angle to come through straight. His does not come through straight. It's leaked to the outside a little bit, and it hopefully doesn't get any worse. It's not the biggest deal. It's not an egregious angle or anything like that, but it's something to watch. I would love to talk a little bit about footwork as well. You don't get to see a lot of this, but what you can see in some of these clips, and especially the ones that the beat reporters have given, special shout out to Alec Lewis, who posted a couple very helpful ones on Twitter, where you could see him sort of hitching through. And so this is a great time to talk about, in a McVay style system, which comprises like a third at least of the league now, but that includes the Vikings, how they like their quarterbacks to sort of operate is timing things based on hitches rather than like seconds, right? So you time it based on hitches and steps. Your play will have, let's say it's a 3-step drop with a hitch. That's your play, like 3-step hitch throw. That would be your first read. And then maybe if there were no hitch, it would be like if you alert, you get rid of the hitch, you throw the alert or something. Let's say there's a go route alert or something like that. That's usually a clear, but you check it. And then your first read, 1 hitch, go. Your second read would be a second hitch. Your third read would be a third hitch, and so on. So when you see what kind of looks like happy feet, if you don't know what you're looking at, it's JJ McCarthy going back and saying 1 hitch, 2 hitch, 3 hitch, 4 hitch, and going through kind of simulating his entire progression. He's practicing getting through the entire progression. So if he's doing that on air, he's going, okay, 1 no, 2 no, 3 no, 4 no, and then he's going to throw the check down. So there's a lot of reports out of OTAs that McCarthy hasn't really attempted the difficult throws. He's thrown a lot of the check down. He's throwing the outlet, in a lot of these drills. And sometimes that can mean, he's being like overly conservative, right? Like that could be a thing. But with, say, Kirk Cousins, who would do that all the time, he was asked about this because Cousins has such a reputation for being conservative and everyone's hypersensitive to seeing it. People asked him and he was like, yeah, I'm not like making a safe decision. We're in drills. I don't care. It's that I'm going all the way through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, my progression. And guess what? 5 isn't a progression. It's always the outlet, because that's the last thing, right? If everything else isn't open, 5 is going to be dump it off to the running back and live to fight another day. So I'm just practicing getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, getting through it all so that I'm, ready to go through the whole progression if need be. And then, hope to rarely like actually use that, but this is how you're practicing. So what you want with those hitches is really tiny little movements. You don't want those hitches to drift you out of place unless you're specifically trying to get to a different launch point for some reason, like a throwing lane, or just trying to get like a better angle on a certain thing. Like you're trying to move the launch point, which like moving your launch point to like a dedicated place and then or like from the top of the drop to a different launch point to get a different angle on something is either what a short quarterback has to do to get a throwing lane or the most advanced thing ever that you'll only see from like a 40-year-old veteran that you don't usually like. Otherwise, you just, I don't know, like rip the ball from where you're standing, right? So that's ideally you don't want to see drift. I don't see a lot of drift at all. So check, good, happy there. And then you get these like kind of tiny little pocket movements that I really like as well, that JJ McCarthy's always been good at. So it's nice to see that that's still there. Actually, Darnold was really good at it too last year. And there was this I think it was like a field access episode of the YouTube series that the Vikings put out after every win, with Josh McCown actually telling that to Sam Darnold. Oh, great job with those tiny little pocket movements. When you're in the pocket and there is some kind of pressure, some kind of disruption, not necessarily the kind of disruption that you have to bail all the way out and run, but just somebody's going to come through. If you can make one little move, make that guy miss, and then get back to your launch point, it's like there wasn't pressure. Those little movements can be really, really, really strong as long as you're not moving so much that you're ruining everybody else's blocking setup. And suddenly you're outside of the tackle box and the tackle can't block anymore because he would have to hold, right? Like if you're not ruining their angles, those little movements can be great, and they just have to be small enough to actually keep you in the physical pocket, which isn't that big in the NFL. So you have to be really conservative and use every inch of space really judiciously. So McCarthy's awesome at that, and I loved seeing that in one of the clips that the Vikings posted, that he just had those tiny little pocket movements, and they were drilling it, right? They were drilling, hey, move up left, but just a little bit, or move up just a little bit, move left just a little bit, move right just a little bit, and you could kind of see that work. This is kind of the thing that's like more fascinating to me sometimes when I start thinking about this, is not necessarily how's JJ McCarthy doing, but more what are they working on with him? What do they, there's a very, very strict limit to the time that the Vikings have to coach this kid. What do they prioritize? What are the things they want to work on with him? I think that's a fascinating question. There is never going to be a good answer to it. And I think if you asked 20 different QB coaches, you'd get 20 different answers to it, which makes it a really interesting thing to think. Okay, they're focusing on the pocket movement stuff with him. They're clearly have asked him to focus on mechanics on his own time. They're not sitting there, working his QB mechanics or his golf swing, right? That's something you got to go away in the summer and work on, right? And come back with it better. But rather they're focusing a lot more on the mental, a lot more on making him do a progression, doing the hitches in the right timing, because that timing is really precise. The hope is that when you get through, you do a hitch, the first route is breaking. By the time it takes you to do another hitch, the second route is now breaking, and so on. So you got to make sure that timing is exactly what we want. And it looks to me familiar in a good way. That it looks like the way that I am familiar with it's having supposed to look. So a lot of very nice stuff. There's one weird thing with McCarthy's base that I never really liked from college that seems to still be there. And then a couple of little sort of side things that are interesting to talk about as well. So we got a lot more to go through here on Locked On Vikings. In college, when JJ McCarthy would get a little bit too long in the pocket, right? When it was a concept that was taking a long time, or he was just holding the ball for whatever reason, his feet would widen out on him. If you know anything about QB mechanics, maybe the first thing that you know is that you're supposed to step into the throw. You want to step in. Old technology is with your lead foot to point that foot at your target. What quarterbacks are doing nowadays is a way to help them lock their hips and stop their hips when they're supposed to stop, so you don't get that over rotation, all that stuff we talked about before. If you turn your foot in a little bit, that lead foot, you kind of angle it in a little bit, it's going to lock everything up exactly the way that you want to. What's funny is that particular trick also works to get rid of false steps for edge rushers. This is something that I learned from Bryson Allen Williams, who at the time was the defensive line coach at USC. I think he's working somewhere in the SEC now. I want to say either like Georgia or Bama or something like that. I think he's working there now, but Google him. I don't know. I don't remember where he's working, but it was a clinic there that I learned this from, that he had a kid that like had false steps that he would continue to take. And he said, turn your foot in a little bit. It locks everything up in a way. And it kind of makes it where the only option is to do it right. And then do that a whole bunch and you get comfortable with it. So if you watch Jordan Love throw, he'll tilt his foot in a little bit. You watch a lot of young quarterbacks throw, they'll tilt their foot in a little bit. It's the trendy thing to be teaching right now. McCarthy is doing that. But sorry, I'm getting all over the place. But with him, when he steps in, if you're already kind of doing the splits, if you're already super wide, you can't really step into the throw the way that you want to. I don't think it's nearly as bad as it was in college. That was a thing in college. That was like a mechanical thing that kind of bugged me. It's just the slightest hint of it is there. Okay, it's about as much of a problem as LaCroix is a grape drink. But you can still see the seeds of it. And that's like a room for, call it like a room for optimization. It's not the kind of thing that's going to hold him back or stop him from being a starting quality quarterback or anything like that. But it's something that you hope over the next couple of years kind of gets ironed out just with experience and getting a little bit better at the sport. The wideness of his base, that also is going to make it harder for your back foot to come up the way you want it to, for your hips to lock the way you want it to, because when you're standing in the splits, when you're, Jean-Claude Van Damming it, you're just not going to be as flexible. Your hips aren't going to do as much as you want. Your shoulders aren't going to do as much as you want. You won't be able to get that same torque. You want to have your feet just a little bit more than shoulder width apart. That's like the ideal. Everybody's body is different. Some people do like to do it a little wider because their hips just work a little different. Their limbs are measured a little differently than the average person. And it's like, whatever, do what you got to do. But rule of thumb is you want it a little bit wider than shoulder width, and he's a little bit beyond what is like optimal, I guess. And I do think he's gonna lose a little bit of torque on that. The last thing is one I'll rehash from the episode a couple days ago, which is throwing on the move to the left. So when you throw on the move, I wrote a long article about scramble drills and throwing on the move when I did my draft article about Caleb Williams. It's at Wide Left. You can still check it out. And it was about the Caleb Williams and the scramble drill, right? And Caleb Williams is really good at both of these things. I kind of propped up Dak Prescott as like the gold standard of this. This is like his thing, is this throw on the move. This is the thing makes his living on. And I think he specializes in it so much that he becomes a really good example for this, even though he got other issues that make him not as good of a quarterback as somebody else. But like when you throw on the run to the right, you basically kind of want to jump and like cross your legs over. And if you jump and cross your legs over, like watch what happens to your shoulders. Your body's going to twist in a certain way that actually kind of snaps your shoulders around in a way that's not dissimilar from the way your shoulders would snap around during a regular throw. It's the same thing on the left. So there's two ways to do this on the left. You could take a couple steps to get your shoulders back the way that you're like pointing toward your target the way you want them to, right? If you're running to your left, you're escaping pressure, you could take a couple steps to turn your shoulders, twist yourself up, and then hopefully you can uncork something reasonable. The other way to do it is to jump and starfish it. Literally jump into the pass, kick your front leg out, and throw. And if you watch what happens, there is a great clip from Alec Lewis that you can see this. It's very far away, but you can absolutely see him doing it. He kicks his leg out and his shoulder whips around and he delivers a pretty accurate ball in like a red zone on air kind of situation where they're sort of practicing that scramble drill. All of this is to say, there are a few little things that I think make that like enough nitpicks that if JJ McCarthy turns out to have like a major accuracy issue, I'm going to have a whole bunch of different ways I could possibly explain that, and my jaw will certainly not hit the floor. But I don't want you to take away that there's a bunch of mechanical, hitches in his giddy up. I would say the most like salient takeaway that I had is things are looking pretty good. Things have improved. More things have improved than have gotten worse, right? The dissociation is back in a way it wasn't last year. The hip rotation, over rotation thing is the main focus, and I'm really satisfied with what I'm seeing there. The tiny little pocket movements are great. He's learning how to throw on the move to his left faster. He used to be the kind of guy that would have to take 2 steps to turn his shoulders. Now he can just kick his leg out and get that thing off. So that's going to help in the improv and the scramble drills and all that stuff. There's all these little things that look better than they did this time last year, which is really encouraging because he didn't spend a lot of last year working on his mechanics. I didn't really expect anything to have improved, and some of it has, even if it's just a little bit. That rules. That means we're still getting a little better at this, and we'll see how he looks when it's actually training camp time. Hopefully this breathless QB mechanics thing, some of it mattered to you at all. I mean, it is still OTAs, okay? The first time we get a preseason game, all of this will be rendered moot, okay? But that's not going to happen for 2 months. So we have this to chew on in the meantime. And then once we have a preseason game, if he's spraying balls all over the place, we'll look at what there is. And that's maybe the thing to send you away with is there's no pressure on these throws. There's, the timings are, made to order. There's no weird coverages. There's no weird, blitzing stuff you have to deal with. There's way less to think about than you would have in a normal game situation. Good mechanics now don't necessarily mean good mechanics when the pads come on and the bullets start flying for real. But the pads are not on and the bullets are not flying for real. So we can't really see what that's about yet. But make no mistake, when they are, we'll talk about this exact same thing and circle back to this and check on how he is doing. And then we'll see a lot of, we'll be able to see the results a little bit more comprehensively too. So we can see, is he throwing accurately or not? The Vikings can't take a preseason game and only cut up the nice moments and hide it all from us. So we'll see. There's still a lot of the jury is out, but I'm much happier with what I'm seeing than I am unhappy with it. I'll see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.